I'll be showing you how to make a tail today. The supplies you'll need is fur, polyfil, your pattern for your tail. Paper or cardboard is just fine. You'll need elastic, pins or clips, needles, thread. You could do some chalk or marking pencils. You'll need scissors or an exacto blade, whatever you decide to cut this with is fine as long as you don't cut the individual fur fibers. You also need, thimble, seam ripper, uh, threaders, snippers, you know, all that all that stuff, and a whisker brush. When it comes to cutting out your tail with the fur, you want to make sure that your fur is going a certain way, which is usually toward the tip of the tail. In this case, our fur is traveling in this direction. Sometimes it can be helpful to make a mark. A new piece of chalk. Since this is blue, I like to use green. It's a good contrast. White and yellow also work. But a good thing you can do just to remind yourself is do a little arrow in the direction of the fur. And then you'll take your pattern. Let's see, we could try and save space usually if you can. And since we'll be hand sewing, we won't need that much of a seam allowance. But we just trace our tail pattern out like so. And since we need two sides, we will flip the pattern over and trace like this. There we go. We have our two sides. You can cut with scissors, but I highly recommend cutting with an exacto blade if you can. And what you want to do is cut just this knitted backing and not the fur fibers. And by doing that, you don't press as hard. I guess the best way of explaining and showing is that I nick the backing of the fibers and using my fingers, I pull the rest of the fibers apart like that, and always make sure that you cut away from yourself. I like to clean off the edges of the fluff by raking my fingers across the fibers along the edge. And I pick up all of the excess fibers we just cut in my hand like that. And now it's not going to be as fluffy. I recommend raking the edges of where you cut as well, especially if you're going to put the fur away because you're not using it all. Just next time you pull it out, you don't get a fluff of fur in your face, at least as much. There we go. Rake these edges. And there we have it. Clean off these edges. So the next time I get this fur, I don't deal with a whole lot of the fluff. There, much better. This away. once you have your two halves cut out, you next want to put them fur sides together, and you can either pin or clip them closed. Clips are pretty easy to do. As you can see, it's pretty easy to tuck in the fur. Just do it with your fingers. Just clip it like that all the way around. Or you could do pins as well. If you do pins, I recommend doing them in like this and tucking your ends in so that it doesn't readily poke you, which is not fun. So if you were to sew by machine, you would be sewing it along the edge like that. You would take these off as you go. In this case, we are going to hand sew, and I'm going to go ahead and get this together, and we'll get started sewing. Usually what I like to do before like closing up the end, I pinch the tip ends together and I get this part of the tail tucked first. It just helps get the rest of this pin down. And I actually like to use a mix of clips and pins, especially when it comes to like corners or ends where it's very fine point, and putting a needle through that is not that easy. There. Now we're ready to sew. We'll get to our thread. And you can use any kind of thread, but your best bet is all-purpose thread. Get one of these needles. I actually have two different threaders. I can show you up close. And this one goes through like the eye of the needle. And then you would thread. I can actually get some thread here. So that you'd stick this through the opening of that and then pull it through like that. And then this little thing has a hook on it. And you'd put it through the eye of the needle and pull the thread through the same way. So there's two different ways of threading your needle. I usually like to grab about from where you hold it in your hand to either your first shoulder or your second shoulder. So in this case, almost a yard. Can't see that, but promise it's real. So it's nice to have little thread snippers on hand. Tie a couple knots. Okay, we're ready. Now, if you're a beginner, I recommend using a number of different thimbles. There's a silicone rubber one. Those are out there. You got either plastic or metal, hard thimbles, or you can get these leather thimbles that have little metal plates on them that protect your fingers. I don't usually have these on unless I'm going through thick material, but since it is just fur, I'm going to take that risk and not wear protection on my fingers. But I recommend that you do if you're a beginner or really don't want to accidentally stick your stuff with a needle. So don't do that. That's my best advice is don't do it. We will be sewing all the way around the tail, but not here. This part we are going to leave open to stuff the tail once we get it sewn. You can choose wherever to start. I'm going to start here at the top. I personally like to do a blanket stitch. Just start, gonna tie a few knots. Okay. And I usually sew about a millimeter in and about a millimeter apart from the edge. Most of the time you just need it to be enough of each side that you're pinching the edges together. Almost sealing them together. And if you need to tuck your fur in as you go, you can actually use your needle. You can tuck the fur in and pinch together with your fingers. Just to show a little bit of what I've gotten started. A couple stitches there. I don't go that far in. But you loop through and then you take your needle and grab it on the other side. So you stick your needle through, and the best thing that you can do is you can wrap your thread around the needle and pull. So this is the blanket stitch. You go through, you take that last stitch and you go through. Personally, I like to grab my thread like this. My needle is here. Grab my needle and I pass the needle through the loop. If you don't know the blanket stitch, it's pretty easy. Otherwise, you can do your simple loop stitch or your straight stitch, which is just like through one side, out the other, and you go like that. But blanket stitch is my favorite because you can actually really lock in your stitches. But now I can show the stitches a little bit better, hopefully. There you go. Down. And let's get sewn. Usually when I have about that much thread left, I stop and get more thread. You can start where you just stopped. You can tie them together. Make it look like it never ended. We can go back and cut that later. We're good to continue. Okay, so I just got to the halfway point. See the stitching all the way to the end there. So now I'm gonna sew this other side and we'll keep going. Okay, and now we make the last stitch. Tie it off. Like so. And there we have it sewn. Now, before you go straight to turning it all the way inside out, our wonderful polyfil here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take some and pre-fluff. Because this is a pretty compact polyfil, so if you break it apart, it turns into a fluffier bundle than what you start with. What I like to do is turn in just the tip first. Only go about half your hand turned in. Take that polyfil. We're going to stick it in there, but we're not going to shove it all the way in. We're just going to make it cozy. And we're going to push a little bit further in. Then we'll grab another bundle of fluff. And we will break it apart. And also by expanding it, that when you push it in, so now if you can, I'm going to grab the end of your tail and pull it just a little bit out, just so that we know that it will come out. Don't want to stuff it so much that it can't. Grab some more fluff. Stick it in here. Oh, you can go ahead and go ahead and turn it all the way inside out since we've stuffed it almost halfway. And then I'm making sure that it's not too stuffed, but it's not filled enough, or that's not, or that it is filled enough. Oh my goodness, words. Let's see, now we've about half our tail is fluffed. So we can grab some more of this and break it apart so that it's fluffy. Just stick this into the opening. We coax it down toward where we last left polyfil. Get some more. And keep stuffing the tail. All right, now that it's all stuffed, we need to sew these two ends together, basically by pinching your seam from the bottom and your seam from the top together. Clips can be helpful in this situation. It's just easier to handle than pins, I think. You can do loop stitch, straight stitch, or blanket stitch. For me, my go-to is blanket stitch or loop stitch. In this case, a simple loop stitch just to get it closed is more than sufficient. actually going to there's actually several different versions of elastic that we'll need to sew on next. Got my needle threaded with a different color. I chose white this time to match the white of the elastic that I have. You could use any color. So there's different kinds of elastic. Personally, get whatever you feel is best to work with. There's a couple different options. Some are soft, others are rigid. Different kinds of elasticity. Personally, I'm going to go with this one. You will need about 4 inches is usually enough. Most belt loops aren't longer than 2 inches, so 4 inches is usually enough. And you'll either need 1 or 2, depending on what you would prefer. I recommend that if you wear jeans that have 1 loop on the back, that you have 2 loops. That way, you can feed your belt through the loop of your tail, then your pants, and then the tail loop again, and you'll have a pretty good locked in tail that doesn't flop around from side to side and stays relatively centered to your tailbone. Elastic comes in many different widths and varieties, so just use what you would prefer or what you're able. So got 2 4-inch pieces of elastic. I'm gonna fold them in half. Like that. And you're gonna line it up so that it matches up with the edge of the seam you just sewed on the end of the tail. Or not the end, the base. So just to show, I've clipped it over the top, and the belt loop is like this. So, and then you just sew that on. Preferably a blanket stitch is best, but any stitch will do. But you want to go through both layers of your fur seam and both layers of the elastic. So it's like 4 layers of fabric you'd be going through. Personally, I like to go over it twice, but once is sufficient. And when I go back across stitches I just did, I actually go in between them so that it's really interlocking each stitch, all the layers, so it doesn't come apart and it holds strong, because you want your tail to be able to withstand some tugging and being able to hold itself, especially if you make a big tail. And there is one loop sewn on. It's pretty strong. I'll get this other elastic strap on, and we will be just about done. And there we have it. But now it's sewn. It's very strong. And the last step is to brush your new tail. I will say that a good hint for seams, if you comb them out, they are less likely to be seen. I usually like to comb them out backwards first. Then I comb it back the direction it goes. And you can hardly see the seam. Gotta do the same for this part. Once you've given it a good brush, Usually a good shakeout helps. And voila, you've made yourself a tail. Well done. Thanks for joining me in making your own furry tail.